Again, I'm Luis. I'm from over at Yale, and I apologize if we have any internet interruptions. I'm actually in the hospital. We had a recent cyber attack, so we're having some intermittent internet, but it's been pretty good today. But overall, I just want to kind of plug in and kind of plug in the concept of deformity correction for the treatment of the spinal tumors. It's kind of the merging of two worlds, the merger of the incredible talks we've had today from these leaders in the spinal tumor field, but also like the ideas that have become pretty common sense and very practical in our common day treatment of degenerative conditions and spinal deformity. So it's often kind of forgotten that, especially as these patients have increased life expectancy, that some of these treatments that we provide, especially surgical treatments, can lead to iatrogenic deformities over time, or treating a deformity at the time of surgery, and sometimes achieving some of the practical goals that we've found that reproduce like quality of life metric improvements can be applied in the field of tumors as well. No true disclosure. So in the world of spinal deformity, most of these deformities are most commonly, especially because of a lot of them are due to metastatic lesions or due to collapse of vertebral bodies. They most of the time lead to this kyphotic deformity with a focal kyphotic angle exceeding 15 to 20 degrees in most cases for the vertebral body collapse. That's true from most of the thoracolumbar region, especially the thoracic region, but the cervical region is a little bit more different, where we can certainly develop these kyphotic deformities, but we can also develop transitional rotational deformities as well because of the different nature of the biomechanical structure of the cervical spine. Um, and kyphotic scoliosis, which we often see in this metastatic lesions, can be seen when there's a chest wall, involvement or unilateral pedicle involvement. Anterolisthesis or posturolisthesis may also be encountered, particularly when the posterior elements of facets are involved in the metastatic lesions. An important concept that's true for the metastatic tumors or tumors in general compared to the deformities we encounter, is particularly in adult deformities, that these are more flexible in nature versus more rigid in nature. These are some examples of some deformities I'm sure many of you have or will encounter if you're starting your practices early now, from either vertebral body collapse in the thoracolumbar spine, or posterior retrolisthesis in the cervical spine from vertebral body the involvement. Some of it can be pretty significant. You can have some fairly destructive conditions, such as the ones Dr. Gokoslan and others have presented today, that could present as a severe deformity that require quite a reconstruction. And I know we had a full talk about this criteria before, so I won't go into much detail. But the deformity is one of the conditions that is looked into as one of the radiographic markers of instability. In terms of what we're aiming for with these deformities, we're really aiming to for this conus of alignment, which I'm sure many of us or many of you are very well aware of. Essentially, your head wants to fall over your pelvis, wants to fall over your head, your feet, and can wiggle over that to some degree, and that's where our body wants to stand in a neutral condition to be well aligned, and for all the neural, foraminal, muscular, and structural structures to be in complete alignment without exceeding their thresholds. Um, in terms of the major parameters that we look for, and that could be a whole talk altogether, but I'll kind of condense it. We're very much interested in kyphosis, the lordosis, the SVA, or the positive valence from the C7 plumb line, the pelvic tilt, pelvic incisosacral slope. And in essence, these parameters will have a relationship which must be maintained, and this relationship is dependent on each other. So a patient with more kyphosis will require more lordosis. A patient with a more pelvic incidence will again require more lordosis as well. So it's not a fixed numbers that we can look for in terms of lordosis or kyphosis, but the relationship is the most important to achieve overall alignment. Similarly, for the cervical spine, C2, C7 angle, COC2 angle, and C2, C7 SVA, as well as others like such as tilt, and are very important to kind of maintain alignment. But overall, really what we want to look for is to make sure that your head fall over your shoulders, over your hips, over your feet, as much as possible, because of the way our bodies were designed to be. Um, Positive sagittal balance is often experienced with patients that have cervical and thoracolumbar tumors, and there's good metrics that have shown that these can lead to decrease in quality of life metrics. Regional cervical, loss of SVA can negatively affect these metrics as well. Particularly, we can see patients which, of course, will complain about pain, but also about functional decrease in outcomes. It's pretty obvious, but the larger the C2 SVA or even the C7 plumb line, the poorer the quality metric scores will be. And in essence, like these can be very much validated and related to the neck disability index. Our body is able to compensate for these deformities to a degree with pelvic retroversion, knee flexion, restricted hip motion. But even that could also lead to secondary disabilities on these secondary structures, such as your knee, your hips, and so forth. Ideally, which, this is a kind of a secondary dogma, or at least for the time being, even though many changes are always evolving these parameters. But one of the things we look for is the lumbar lordosis PI mismatch to not be more than 9 degrees, and as well to look at the relationship with T1 and the lordosis. Again, these are not fixed angles like that we can just go for. Everybody, our patients will come with different pelvic incidents, and the pelvic incidents will really kind of secondarily ask for instance lordosis and kyphosis to kind of maintain overall alignment. It's just kind of like a picture, description of that, where you can kind of see how as the pelvic incident increases and your lordosis will have to increase to kind of compensate for that. In terms of correction techniques for deformity secondary to these tumors, some are very simple, such as positioning. Some are a little bit require more instrumentation results, so cervical traction. And then obviously with the hardware as well, we can have quite powerful corrections as we do the surgeries themselves. In terms of positioning, with the positioning alone, especially with these kyphotic deformities, you can actually agree, about 6 to 10 degrees of reduction. So if you come in with already like a 15 to 20 degree loss of kyphosis, and then just by positioning the chest pads quite high, the hip pads quite low, you can really push up like that, especially in the thoracolumbar region, to kind of increase that Kolb angle reduction just by the positioning itself. So it's one of the more powerful maneuvers that we have, and it's really important sometimes. Kind of skipped over at times. For cervical deformity, cervical traction very similarly can be very powerful. Of course, as we increase the weight, we can obtain more of a reduction technique. We do have to take extra care in the reduction of these patients, as they are more mobile and more unstable. Some of the commonly conditions that we encounter, even cervical fractures themselves, but the same kind of principles would apply with 5 to 10 pounds per separate level, with careful radiographic following as you're going to performing the reduction itself. Expandable cages are actually surprisingly very powerful, especially when the reduction of kyphosis in the cervical and the thoracic spine. There's many different ones from the companies with no typical preference, but just by expanding that cage, it can really improve the overall kyphosis and overall distraction, and expand the area that has collapsed down. Open reduction techniques with screws, very familiar with. Cantilever techniques, among others, or using post or reduction towers can really kind of reduce the contouring your rod preoperatively, or to reduce the kyphosis. It can also really achieve quite a reduction of the deformity itself. I know Dr. Mendel went over vertebral kyphoplasty before in a demonstration, but these in themselves can actually improve some of the deformity that's associated with the vertebral body metastases. Some of the literature shows even a 2 to 5 degree improvement in overall kyphosis with just the kyphoplasty itself. And this is like a radiographic picture which shows the improvement in the overall alignment and this was just a kyphoplasty that was performed. You can see it actually can be quite powerful when done the right way. This is a quick case, and then I'll do one more. So 57-year-old female with a small cell carcinoma, percent of Western backbone imbalance, and you can kind of see the kyphosis that's developed, which is a very common finding in metastatic lesions. In this particular case, which one of the patients is Dr. Mendel, we were able to reduce quite nicely. We spent contouring the rod with posts, and then we used cement to kind of fill that gap and provide even more stability and reduction of the overall kyphosis with really nice global alignment. So a quick little segue, which I know Dr. McCormick is speaking next. I'll talk about spinal deformity after childhood tumors, which is described entity as because of the nature of these tumors, a lot of them are approached by laminectomy as a standard of care. The post-laminectomy deformities have been reported quite high with 10% in adults, but over 20 to 100% in pediatric cases. And even though there's definitely techniques, including instrumentation, one of the ones that have become more commonplace or argued for is the use of laminoplasty to avoid the progressive deformity that comes with these patients with pretty favorable outcomes. This is a quick illustration of that with a patient that just went laminectomy. You can see the deformity that's developed over time with a similar patient with a laminoplasty that kind of was able to maintain their alignment. So in short, deformities from metastatic disease are usually kyphotic from collapse of the anterior elements, though they can be a translation of the posterior elements are involved as well. They're very quite flexible, which tend themselves pretty well to realignment, like merging the two worlds of deformity and spinal metastatic disease, when possible, can increase the overall quality metrics of patients as they continue. And thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Luis. Anybody have any questions?
So, Dr. Kolb, I loved your big picture and then the very specific approaches and how you put those together. So I do a lot of deformity surgery, and again, 4 rods has become really de rigueur almost. Certainly the thoracolumbo-pelvic spine will have a second lab. We had a nice video presentation by our colleague, Dr. Patel here. I see a lot of surgeons now starting to use 4 rods in the cervical spine, the cervical thoracic junction. I've actually not gone there. Is that something mechanically necessary in these compromised patients?
That's interesting. I mean, I myself have not used a lot of 4-quad constructs in the cervical thoracic region. Partially, they do limit a lot of the bone graft surface, so they kind of inhibit some of the fusion postoperatively. They also probably will create quite a bit of dead space for those like seromas to form quite after. I think the with like the new metals coming out that are like substantially like stronger, they might replace some of the need for that. Yeah, it's an interesting thought. I definitely for the thoracolumbar region, especially with the instances of like quite a bigger like PSO or some like area where the rate of pseudoarthrosis is quite high, that forward rod construct can provide a lot of stability until that fusion kind of happens or postoperatively. For the cervical thoracic region, I have myself done a lot or seen a lot, but I think it's because of just the amount of space that you have where you put your bone graft and I would probably argue to use a different alloy or metal to kind of increase the strength of that area instead.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Luis.
Thank you so much.
No problem.